Preparing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, probably. Looks like we are live.
Okay. Let's check that YouTube page and see that the video is up there.
It is.
All righty. We copy that HTML.
Perfect.
And we can share it right into the group. Now, I don't know. We'll have to make sure of this here. I don't know if it will just show the live video being played on the YouTube or if it's going to appear as a link and try and direct people to the YouTube video. That would be unfortunate because in order for them to participate in that case, it's going to need them to have a YouTube account.
No, we are going to get this working on Facebook. I am convinced of it.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone who is tuning in later. You are seeing the future here.
Now with your laptop, David, you're going to be able to keep eyes on the comment section on Facebook. We could just go about it that way. As long as we can see the comments rolling in.
That's what I'm about to do.
Excellent. Okay.
I'm very glad we started a few minutes early here.
I am as well.
Okay, I just posted the link on Facebook.
You keep me updated because I'm blind. I just got my camera facing me.
People might need to click because basically there is just like a thumbnail of the video itself. Like,
is there any way for you to interact with it on the Facebook page as Mr. Beans to do anything to open it?
This is what it looks like. Like you don't see it live, you just see so you'd have to click on the link, but then they can comment below though. Like they can comment here.
So are you going to be able, because I mean, what I need from you basically, David, is to converse with me, obviously, but are you going to be able to keep tabs on that comment section and you can just feed me? Yeah. So you feed me whatever comes in on there.
What I'm going to do. Yeah.
All I can see is you and I.
I will be watching.
Okay. And I will let you lead us in when you think the time is ready.
I will. We've got about 60 seconds here.
Okay. After this, though, I do want to play around with the Facebook Live feature because it does make sense that it would work that way for people with guest speakers.
Absolutely.
I'm not quite sure where that screen share is, but we'll find it.
100%. And I am going to copy paste this into the event as well.
Okay.
So that
And after we wrap up here tonight, we'll go through the YouTube video and make sure it's, you know, tagged and titled and everything correctly how we want it, if it's not already.
It's unfortunate that it's not. Not letting me copy paste that. Welcome to anybody who's joining us so far. Forgive us while we work on our technical issues here. But we're going to get this figured out. We're going to try to do this on the event now, hopefully. Lights. Try this. Okay. All right, I have posted everywhere, like 6 different places on our page.
Okay.
But it is just YouTube. So we want to welcome anybody who is already watching us, and hopefully more people will continue to tune in here. But my name is David with Mr. Bean's Babies.
And I am Nick, also known as Mr. Beans. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight.
We are so glad that you're here, and thank you for bearing with our technical difficulties here, but it's only 8:03. That's not too bad. So yeah, we are here discussing the HBOMAX documentary that came out just 3 days ago called Beanie Mania. It was a wonderful documentary, but definitely want to get your feedback on it. So as we are discussing this right now, and we have a few kind of pre-topics that we have set up, Nick and I, but to add your comments, go to the main post on the Mr. Bean's Babies Facebook page that was just posted a few minutes ago with this YouTube link, and comment right there. And that is how you're going to be able to join the discussion. I will be continually watching for your comments this whole evening. And we should be going, this video go for about an hour or so. So definitely comment there, send us your thoughts, send us your opinions, no holds barred, and we will definitely bring up any comments that we see. So, but with that, we'll let Nick go ahead and launch in.
Great. Thanks, David. Yeah, so as David alluded to here, we're here tonight to discuss the Beanie Mania documentary that was released on HBOMAX here on December 23rd. If you have not watched it, we will start this discussion right out. I will recommend it. Absolutely. It's a good watch. It's a good bit of fun. Very, very nostalgic if you were so lucky to be around during the 90s, during the time frame of the story that they are telling there. With that being said, I found it really, really sentimental for me, this particular documentary, because it does hit home, you know, not so much in the sense of the personal stories that are being told by the interviewees. My experience was much more that involved in the backdrop of this documentary, which was the hordes of people that were going absolutely bonkers during the 90s, running from one shop to the next looking for Beanie Babies. It was a wonderful time in my life and in my childhood development. I have really, really fond memories with both of my parents doing that. David, yourself, the 90s beanies, we've discussed this before. I know that this was a really, really transformative time for the both of us.
It very much was. What was notable in the documentary is that they pointed out a lot of these key moments, one of them being the death of Princess Diana, and almost immediately thereafter, the release of the Diana, the Princess Beanie Baby. And I cannot tell you the number of stores that we tried to go to trying to look for those 12 elite beanies that were going to show up at every location. I saw them at some malls sitting in store windows immediately at $500, $1,000. And we would gaze up at them as you would look at a store window at Christmas time and just be like, that's that unattainable thing that maybe someday I'll get lucky. But I mean, I am not immune. My dad was not immune, and following UPS trucks around or going to the Hallmark store 2 hours before it opened to see if there was going to be one of those magical boxes with the red tie heart on the side coming that day. It got crazy. It was an obsession, but I mean, it also, like Nick said, it was some of the fondest memories I've ever had. So.
And we would not hold it against anybody who has watched this documentary to consider it a cautionary tale. They really could have named this entire documentary "Hindsight is 2020," and I think that the point that they would have tried to been getting across would have been relatively the same. With that being said, I do want to make a few points here about this. For starters, it is through HBO. Which is something we are all very familiar with at this point, home box office. And because of that, as you would expect, the production quality is very, very good. I thought, all of the audio visual was excellent. It very well, like some other streaming services, I won't name any because we use them all, we enjoy them all. But there are other streaming services that do kind of employ videos that are much more indie or, under the radar, maybe a brand new budding director, producer, whatever the case may be. This definitely had the feel to it of something much more seasoned. And I don't know, I'm not certain if the director, producer of this had done work in the past. It feels very much like they have. They feel like they are kind of in their element while leading us through this documentary and through this story. I didn't have any nitpicks or anything to say in regards to that. Incredibly watchable in those regards. The story that they tell, everything flows quite nicely. And when it comes to Beanie Babies, we are on Facebook, we're on Mr. Beans, we're on YouTube. We have countless discussions because the subject matter is just that vast, right? There's so many different topics that you can touch on within this hobby. And you can't fault them in this documentary for choosing what is arguably the most popular story there is to tell, which is the, mostly the rise of beanies, we'll say, in the 90s. They do kind of briefly touch on what we might consider the fall as well near the end of it. But this is definitely the story and the rise of Ty Warner and his product and just the absolute mania, the Beanie Mania that it stirred up in the late 90s. So with that being said, the storyline is very, very cohesive. I know that there are probably people out there that wish there were other facets that were included in it. There are definitely things that we deal with nowadays and much more currently that we go, oh God, I wish this would have been included, or I really wish they would have said something about this. But in fairness to them, they were telling a story about the 90s, about the hysteria, about the mania, about the rise of beanies. And I think they absolutely accomplished that with this documentary.
So, Nick, I already have a couple comments here. First of all, welcome, Diana. We're glad that you're here. Andrew commented that the lead producer of this documentary was at VH1 and MTV before. So that's
Oh,
very interesting.
wonderful. Nail on the head. And like I said, from watching this documentary, it absolutely plays like that. You can tell that this isn't someone that was getting their feet wet for the first time. Yeah, really, really had a vibe of somebody that, you know, felt in their element. This is what they are doing with their life, and rightfully so.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. And for all the people who are just starting to join us now, we're glad that you're starting to join us. Continue to comment on Facebook. We will be watching continually for your comments, and we'll bring in any of your thoughts because we want to hear your thoughts as well. Like I said, we've got a little bit pre-prepared here, but we want this to be an open live discussion with everybody and hear what you guys are thinking. So
Absolutely.
go ahead, Nick.
Absolutely. Yeah. So obviously, this documentary is very, very centric around the people in it. You know, in my opinion, everything else is the backdrop. Even the story itself is the backdrop of this. The focus are the interviewees, and they did a really nice job framing these people, giving some background on them, their importance in the hobby, and the roles that they played in the late 90s and even up to today. With that being said, you know, I would estimate there were somewhere 10 to 15 different interviewees that occurred throughout the entire documentary. There were a few people that had smaller segments than others, but generally it's the same 10 to 15 people that are taking us on this journey throughout the documentary with them. I think across the board, none of these people are anyone that I know personally. They're no one that I have any contact with, but many of these people are people that I am very, very aware of. I know who they are. I know what they do. Very, very familiar with all of them. I thought they all came across as very likable. They came across well. And once again, we go back to, you know, the director and everybody that was leading this and the production, editing, things like that. For the most part, we'll get to editing in a bit here. But as far as framing the story around these people and making them the centerpiece of this documentary, absolutely, that was the right decision, I think, on production's part. And I like that because I have a note here, one that really stuck out to me while watching this documentary a couple of times leading up to this discussion we're having tonight. And that is that they could have chosen to have some sort of narration or narrator to kind of guide you and maybe push the story along in a certain direction, you know, or if it was a little more malevolent, they could have chose to maybe push an agenda of this story that they wanted to. This documentary did not do that. There is no narrator speaking. There are certain points throughout where maybe some key information doesn't get audibly said by somebody. So you will have a little static shot of some text, some language that fills in any blanks you might need. But other than that, there is no narration. They left the storytelling almost completely up to the people who were there and had these firsthand experiences. And I think it's because of that this documentary feels so genuine. It wasn't because the production crew said, you know, we want to talk about beanies and we want to tell this story and we're going to make sure it gets told our way. You know, they could have done all these behind the scenes editing and voiceovers and then just did cuts of the people that were involved. They didn't do that. They really left it in the hands of the people that were there in that time. And yet again, I think a very wise decision on the production's behalf.
Couple other people I want to welcome. Richard, welcome. Also, Michelle, welcome. She said that she met.
Hello, everybody.
Michelle said that she met Becky back in the day. That's really cool. I'd love to hear more about what you talked about with her. She certainly seems fascinating, and I you know, in the few little conversations that we have had kind of off and on, let's see, Michelle said that she brought beanies to be authenticated at her house while you were in the Chicago area. That's really cool.
Very
So
nice. Yeah.
You were actually in that, which that's where it all goes back to. Nick, this blows my mind that this goes back to one court in one suburb in Chicago, kind of where this all begins.
Yeah, essentially, you know, these initial women that are the framework of this documentary, to call them anything other than trailblazers at this time in their own right. Not to say they were the sole cause. Of course, there were a lot of people. This documentary, as many people that were included, just as many were left out. Absolutely. You know, this isn't the entirety of everyone that caused this to become what it was. But these women were 100% involved to the fullest. Absolutely. Becky Phillips, you know, was a pinnacle, you know, or just a huge, huge piece of everything that occurred there. For those that are a little unaware about Becky Phillips by her name, she also had a hand in True Blue Beans. She was very, very much involved in authentication services as well as PB bags. Really, really trusted, highly respected individual in the beanie community, and still today. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yes, and Andrew said, can I go ahead and shoot you messages to send comments? Absolutely, you can message us. I am currently watching on YouTube as well as on Facebook for your comments right now. So
and in
let
regards to private messages, for anybody that does want to send private messages, we implore you to do so. Absolutely. We just ask that we direct them to David. David D'Onofrio, as my hands are tied here with filming on my end. So David is running everything behind and keeping me up to date on comments and questions. Anything sent directly to me, I won't be able to see during the entirety of this video until we're finished.
So Nick, one thing that I did want to mention
Sure.
is so one of the big pieces, there were several major themes or things in the documentary, and one of them did touch on counterfeits and the importance of authentication. And this is one piece that, again, we thought the documentary was extremely well done, but what was a little bit ironic, and it was mentioned by several people online as soon as they even saw the trailer, is they saw a picture of a billionaire bear, and it was unfortunately not an authentic billionaire bear. They showed it several times. It was kind of being spun around as they were, you know, even mentioning that this was being given out to employees and things like that. It was a little bit disheartening that it was not a real one for everyone that watched it. This is a actual billionaire bear. You see that he has a lighter fur color. It's actually a little bit of a mottled fur color, as opposed to the dark brown fur that was in the one in the movie. There was also a Humphrey the camel that appeared to kind of have like the bulging eyes, which is a little bit of a red flag when you see Humphrey. His eyes are actually very flat with his face. And so I thought it was ironic because there was such an emphasis put on authentication in this documentary, and yet it proved, wow, even the Hollywood stars who put together this video might have been fooled by a counterfeit beanie or two.
Buckle up, everybody, because this is where David's going to earn his keep tonight. Because I am about to ramble for a moment. Okay, let's talk about some of the static shots, which was what we're getting at here with the beanies that are being shown. Of course, there are many interviewees in this documentary that have collections displayed behind them. And, you know, I thought that all turned out well. I think it was a nice backdrop for those people. Everything was really too out of sight to be able to declare authentic, not authentic, but they were collections that these people treasured. It's in the static filler shots that they use that we start to get these really, really good glimpses of certain beanies being shown in between the story being told. Now, I will say there are a lot of filler shots in there that showcase some really fantastic beanies. We have plenty of photos of the original 9 with first gen hang tags. You see them a lot in the beginning. There's also a small scene that I pinpointed out where someone is casing up in acrylic cases, and there's a #1 bear that looks very much authentic. And you're right, David. A lot of this was shown in the trailer for this documentary. Now, let's say this documentary, I'm sure, is going to be viewed by a lot of people. HBOMAX, very popular streaming service. To anyone watching it just out of pure curiosity, that is not involved with beanies, that is not a collector, that is not active, that is not highly educated on them, which is totally fine. This documentary, I think, is enjoyable for anyone that recollects this phase during the 90s that they discussed. With that being said, to the normal person watching this documentary, they would have no idea that counterfeits were shown. It really wouldn't devalue the documentary as a whole to them whatsoever. Where this caused a bit of an uproar was absolutely within the educated community of people that are aware of these things and are still active in the Beanie community day in and day out. And yeah, it's a bit of a sore thumb. It's almost immediately recognizable. So a lot of us that had seen the trailer that featured the counterfeit billionaire bear, we were kind of hopeful leading up to the release of this documentary. Maybe it's included during a segment where they're discussing counterfeits, which would make perfect sense, giving the absolute, as far as Beanie Babies go, this documentary is almost like, just a star-studded cast, right? We have all of the major players here. And I would have to imagine, I could almost guarantee that this was a flub that happened in pre-production, during editing.
And in fact, Nick, not to interrupt you, but someone who is quite involved in the Beanie community, who is going to remain anonymous, but did message me and said that they were told that those still shots and things like that were done by an agency that was kind of farmed out versus the actual production, which was handled by HBO.
And
so that makes a lot of sense that there would be some filler things here and there. But yeah, and then another person commented, yeah, you wouldn't have wanted to actually handle an authentic billionaire bear with your hands like they did in the movie. That's probably true. These are pieces that, you got to be very careful. So I completely
that could absolutely be the case. Both
you're coming from.
Points.
Yep.
And as far as the first message there, that makes total sense to me, because you would have to think, if this were something that were ongoing during the actual filming, or even if this were able to be previewed to the people involved, which from the people I've spoken with, I don't believe that was the case. Obviously, you have to have HBOMAX to have this. I don't think these people got a nice screening for being involved first. If they had, they almost certainly, I would think almost across the board, given the people that were involved in this as interviewees, would have went, you're not going to want that in there. Yeah, with that being said, the billionaire bear is really prevalent. There's definitely a few shots with him involved. And then nearing the end of the documentary, as David mentioned, there was also a Humphrey that was definitely counterfeit. Little nitpicks, right? These are coming from those of us that are tied into this day in and day out, that love beanies. Like I said, if you're watching the documentary just for entertainment value, you would really have no idea. It wouldn't affect the quality of the documentary as a whole to you, not whatsoever. But yeah, and they did a good job showing a lot of really nice stuff as well. So even the agency that did this, we can sit here all day and say, the counterfeit Billy and the counterfeit Humphrey. But truth be told, there was probably somewhere around 10 to 15, yet again, filler shots of beanies on their own individually. And, for them to miss 2 out of 15 for a company that is not knowledgeable in this stuff, not so bad. That's an all right percentage, I would say. Small nitpicks. That's all we had in that area.
Absolutely. There. And a lot of people are commenting right now and saying, yeah, they don't think that it would affect the viewership at all.
No, none whatsoever.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's a great, if you are wondering whether to send it to your family, or the people who are watching this right now, I'm sure you are all quite involved in the hobby as we are. Encourage your family to see it, because it will remind them maybe why you still do this, or bring a little bit of nostalgia. I thought it was when we were discussing it that it was going to be put out on Christmas week. I thought that was kind of just a stroke of genius. Everyone is nostalgic this time of year. Everyone is just thinking back to their childhood and things like that. And I thought it was a perfect time of year to release it as well.
I agree. Yeah, the marketing strategy on that was well done. And I also implore anyone that has children, especially if you as a young parent, a middle-aged parent, if you lived through that time and enjoyed it, and it's something, a memory that you kind of hold on to, if you're one of the parents that's lucky enough to be able to get your children to sit still for 120 or for 80 minutes, hour and 20 minutes there, it would be a great watch for them. It's very family friendly. Obviously, there's not really much of anything. There would probably be some parts that might drag for younger children a bit when we start getting into the legal side near the end of the documentary with Ty Warner. But really, really fantastic stuff. A lot of nice, bright colored, that's what beanies are. Wonderful content. And absolutely enjoyable. During one of my watches, my oldest sat and watched it with me, and he found it entertaining for as long as he made it through it. But it was nice to be able to sit and kind of explain to him, Dad's not just making up stories about the 90s. This was a crazy thing. This was a whole lot of fun back then. And a little bit nutty, right? It's another one of those things where in the moment when you're driving from store to store, well, yeah, of course we are. This is what everybody's doing right now. Everybody's out searching for these. And then you look back and you're like, my God, I don't know that I could be convinced to do that as a parent now myself, to be asked, we got to drive all over the state or possibly from state to state looking for these little stuffed animals. That would sound right out of this world to me today in this day and age.
Couple things that I wanted to mention that some people have brought up here, because
Sure.
One thing that was a major piece of this documentary, obviously it followed Mary Beth, and she is the founder of one of the premier magazines that really just got out the word about beanies, and it talked about just everything that was coming down the pike. I mean, this magazine went from quarterly to, I think she said, bi-monthly. I certainly was a subscriber. Many of us were, because she got a lot of good inside information that went more in depth than maybe the Thai website would, and things like that. Plus, it just had beautiful photography. I just love to just browse through the pictures of the brand new beanies every time a magazine came out. But someone did mention that they said it wasn't mentioned that Ty had his own version of a magazine. And it also wasn't mentioned about the PR that Ty did do. And that it even someone mentioned here that Ty did do some PR and even announced a few new toys right before the HBO documentary came out. So that almost goes right into, though, that as it did say in the documentary, Ty did kind of keep an eye out for some of these things that people were talking about and things like that. He was aware of what people were saying, and he would definitely play that into his marketing strategy. One thing I wanted to mention, Nick, and I wanted to get your thoughts on was one of them, I believe Peggy mentioned that it was not initially Ty's idea to use the term retired when he put a beanie out of production. But then when people started considering it that, he decided to join on the bandwagon, and then on his website would say, newsflash, there's going to be some retired beanies. So do you want to talk about maybe how it's this interesting of how, what are the aspects that Ty was pushing versus what were the aspects where the public maybe was giving him ideas?
So I want to touch on a couple of things that you said here. I want to go back to where we first started talking there. Ty Warner, he gets framed in this probably about as accurately as you possibly can, because there is a lot of mystery surrounding him, even today, especially today, I would maybe say. With that being said, one thing that is absolutely for sure about Ty Warner, he is ever the marketer, right? We know this. He was, one of the most successful marketers in the toy industry in the 90s. Obviously, I am aware that he actually did release a new line of Ty products. I believe they are called Beanie Bellies, and he did that right before the documentary launched. So, this is Ty Warner. Here we are, 2021, his fingers still directly on the pulse. That does not surprise me in the least. I was able to get a quick look at some of these new Ty products. Lots, again, we're talking about different animals, different design variations. They do very much remind me of sort of what we refer to as the pot-bellied bears, which came out as the newer design style after following the New Face Teddy style. The first ones that pop into my head are the birthday bear set that have the neck ruffles. That's a pot-belly bear style. This new tie product line, I'm almost certain it's Beanie Bellies. They do have kind of that vibe. Obviously, with the term belly, they do have a bit of a pot belly. They sit upright. Yeah, a nice product line, and it's kind of a welcome departure from what they've been doing recently with the Squishaboos and the teeny ties and the Beanie Boos and things like that. It does kind of feel like it's hearkening back to a time that we all enjoyed in the 90s with the Beanie Babies line. So kudos to Ty Warner. Not that he needs it from me. Yeah, very well played. He knew people were going to be watching this. It's right around Christmas. What better way to roll in this documentary than with the release of a new tie product line? So good for him there. Back to what David said. As far as the retirement comment, retiring beanies. I don't know that there's ever going to be a way to know that answer to that for certain. I do know, as David mentioned, that Peggy does mention it in the documentary. I believe it was more opinionated on her end. Not saying it's incorrect. It absolutely could be. She would probably know better than I, right? But yeah, to know for certain whether or not that was his plan all along. Obviously, he has had many good plans. Maybe that one was just lucky coincidence. It very well could have been. And I think someone else maybe touched on the point where, it could have just been a few of the designs they ran out of the fabric form at that time. They just didn't have whatever it took to create them any longer. And so, by no fault of anyone, they just end up not being produced any longer. And you inevitably have your first retirement, whether you planned it or not. If he did not plan it, wow, talk about luck, right? You were just falling into a brilliant marketing plan by mistake. If he did plan it, it doesn't surprise me in the least, because here we are talking about Ty Warner, who, as we mentioned, is an incredibly successful businessman and marketer. With that being said, we get back to him listening to Lena, who is also featured in the documentary, who I found incredibly endearing. I thought she had great segments, her and her brother in this documentary. Her experience and the role she played in all this, it can't be understated. I don't think she was integral in everything that occurred back then, especially the Thai website, and she ended up heading up kind of that design sector. Obviously, as she mentioned, the poems were her idea. All of these really great things. So, it's also important to remember that when we're talking about Ty Warner and marketing and retirement and all these things, let's not forget that he had just an absolutely brilliant team surrounding him, even in those early phases when there was only 12 people at a small little Thai headquarters. He did well to surround himself with very, very sharp minds during that time, and she was one of them. And so far that they mentioned that it's a possibility that the Thai website, the guest book, where you would chat with other people and maybe buy or sell or trade Beanie Babies, quite literally was one of the first known blogs out there. We are talking the mid 90s at this point. That was breakthrough technology then. I'm not saying it didn't exist. I'm not saying they invented the wheel. But for them to utilize something that complex back then was, really, really far ahead of its time. Even if they weren't the first to be on the ground floor of something like that, absolutely helped this to skyrocket to the heights that it did. And as far as the retirements, I also have written down here, did Ty invent FOMO, which is something that, we discussed today in many things. You can see it in, you can see it written down as an acronym all throughout the internet. There's obviously commercials and things like that use it as advertising, and FOMO, of course, standing for fear of missing out. And if you think about it, that really was the basis for the way that beanies were marketed. Once retirements became a thing, if you did not have this piece in your collection, whether it was true or not, you had that fear that you were going to miss out and you weren't going to ever find this thing. And the key, in my opinion, to all of that success was Ty Warner and his company being very, very tight-lipped about all the right things, especially production quantities. If the general public had had access to the numbers of each design and such that were being produced, very good chance this craze does not occur. The fact that they keep those cards close to their chest within the factory, they don't discuss how many of these things were made. They just tell you, we made a bunch, they're in the stores, and by this date, they no longer will. It's all done. We're not making any more. Without having that prior knowledge of how many of these are in existence, you're going to get that mass hysteria, the flocking to the stores to complete collections. Another brilliant, brilliant strategy on behalf of Tycorp.
And so that does lead into another big piece in the documentary then talks about the secondary market. And I'm having a good conversation with one of our viewers, Michelle, who just talked about that her daughter was able to sell one of the original Clubby Bears, which was one of the very first beanies that you could get only through the website, only through the Beanie Babies official club. And it would come direct to your door in that plastic bag. And her daughter was able to sell it for $50. And so it's just an example of, you originally are getting that piece for $5-10 and instantly marking it up the day that you get it, going straight to whether it showed classified ads, and then it showed people having websites, or later on using eBay and things like that, or even on the Thai guest book itself. It's very interesting that and I'm not sure that I could even imagine a company allowing that now, on their own company website, to allow people to talk about their own product, selling it secondary market for many times higher than the original price. I can't even imagine, I don't think, a company allowing that on their official website in 2021. But here was Ty just saying, it's open season. Yes, we want to see people promoting you selling these beanies for hundreds or thousands of dollars on our official page.
Yeah, so much of this success was word of mouth after the fact. The secondary market was quintessential, necessary even, for this to happen. And you're right, David. There really aren't many examples, if any, of something like that occurring today. And I think the fact that they not only allowed that, but kind of, pushed people that, like, this is what this is for. This is why we created this guest book. We hope you get on here and do these things. It adds to that air of mystery surrounding the company back then. Who is this man? Who are the details? And one of my favorite quotes in the entire documentary is quite literally in the opening sequence, where this one of the interviewees is saying it, but while it's showing it, it's a disembodied voice here. And you hear them say, "We had no evidence that these things were valuable at all. We all just believed it." And that's because that's the way they marketed it. Because in any market, supply and demand is going to dictate everything. And because nobody knew the supply, the demand skyrocketed. That is such a bizarre combination when you think about things today. Nothing is really done in that manner anymore. There really aren't companies that are making things and keeping it. We're not going to discuss how many of these we produce. Could be hundreds, could be thousands, could be millions. And anything in between would be a fair guess. And when you have people clamoring for it, the fact that you have held on to that information and it's not publicly known, wow, what a firestorm, and we got to see that in real time.
For sure. I almost wonder if it makes me think, and there are definitely some people that I'm talking with simultaneously on here who are very nostalgic and saying, like, I would do it all again. I would jump right back and do it all again. And it makes me wonder, in this world now of the internet, where so much of the information is at our fingertips, it kind of makes me wonder. I put myself in those shoes now and say, gosh, like I could fly to a store in Arizona and in 2 seconds I could put on Twitter, hey, they've got spooky in stock. And like, how
Yeah.
quickly would there be just a flock of people because they saw it on Twitter and they retweeted it? Like, it would be very interesting. What would that do now if things were just pushed a few years further down the timeline? Now we bring in social media instead of just, the guest books and the chat rooms. How would it affect it now? I'm not sure.
I think realistically, because shopping in person, while we still need it, while it's still essential in our lives, not nearly as predominant as it used to be. So the flocking to the stores and kind of the bum rushing the doors and people getting hurt and trampled, I don't know that it would really be possible to recreate that in this day and age. It would probably look a lot more like websites going down. I think that's what it would be due to traffic issues. So it would be much more like, once again, even in this technology advanced and online world we live in, FOMO is still a real thing, right? If a website announces we have this new product and it's only available through our website and everybody flocks it and the website crashes, if you were one of the unfortunate ones to get on after it has crashed, you're going to start to feel that panic, right? Just the way that you did back then. But yeah, I think that would be the main difference, in my opinion, would just be everybody trying to quickly get to the same .com as opposed to the same store. Probably a lot less injuries in today's market, I think. I do want to go back to something else.
A lot of injuries to your finger just saying refresh, refresh, refresh.
Yeah, right.
Which let's be honest, and that website I do have to just hit home was brilliant. I cannot tell you the number of times, especially around Y2K, I sat there for hours hitting refresh. And in fact, even at midnight when they promised that there might be something on there wouldn't be. And it might be 30 or 45 minutes or even an hour after the promised time. And I can't tell you, I would be like, is the internet broken? Let me restart my dial up. Like, what's going on? It looks like the website's down. And then, like, people are just, freaking out on the other. Like, did I miss something? Was there a glitch? Is it really Y2K right now? Because that was the website I immediately wanted to hit at midnight. It wasn't looking at the fireworks in Sydney, Australia or something. It was tie.com. And the number of times, I mean, especially around the end, or a few of those times specifically, I heard rumors that, Glory is going to be retired. And if Glory is retired, well, then we know that tomorrow he's going to be $200. Like,
Right.
and just the speculation, I mean, the internet just continued to fuel it. It would just spin and spin.
So I want to go back to something else that I really enjoyed about the documentary as well. And that was the sheer amount of vintage footage that they were able to incorporate in this thing. For 80-minute runtime, it's almost second to none. You would be so hard pressed to just dig around online, YouTube, any sites really that you can think of, and try and dig up these separate pieces of footage and archival things. You would be all day at it to try and get a few really interesting ones pieced together. Second for second, this documentary has it in spades, right? It's really, really commendable, the amount of it they were able to unearth and put in front of so many viewers on this sort of stage, being HBOMAX. Yeah, really, really difficult. I'm sure that was not a terribly easy feat for them to accomplish. Honestly, one of my favorite parts about the documentary is all of the archival footage that they were able to include from in almost every instance. Whatever part of the story they were at and discussing, they had vintage footage to go along with it. So, bravo on that front. It definitely added to all of the appeal that I had from this documentary. Another point that I want to make too, while we're moving along here, For any of you that are aware or not aware, there is a book that exists that is called The Great Beanie Baby Bubble. And it's written by Zach Bissonnette, if I'm pronouncing that, Bissonnette. And this is something else that I'm going to recommend as well. If you like Beanie Babies, if you enjoy the history and some of the mystery and the background info and everything, it's almost essentially the same story, because we are discussing the rise leading up to the fall of Beanie Babies in the late 90s there, where the book does dive in a lot deeper is with Ty Warner and his personal life. And especially the lead up to the Beanie Baby line existing. So this doc, I don't know which way I want to phrase this. I don't know if I want to say the documentary feels like a watered down version of the book, or if the book is an extremely fleshed out version of the documentary. Whichever way I choose to phrase it, it's not a slight at one or the other. I think that they make really, really excellent companion pieces. For anybody that has watched the documentary but has not had the chance to read the book, there we have it. There is a copy of it there. There is also a couple different copies online. I know the copy I have, it's a black hardcover with a, I believe it's a New Face Teddy on the front, a brown New Face Teddy, or maybe a Britannia, something like that. But yeah, there are definitely more copies of this book out there. For anybody that has not read it yet, again, I really recommend that as well. If you liked the documentary, I can almost guarantee you will thoroughly enjoy that book as well. The similarities are really, really there. And because I got to read the book before watching the documentary, it did really fill in a lot of gaps for me. As I was listening to this documentary progress, while I didn't know everything that they touched on, while I learned plenty and got to hear different insights from different people, the story itself felt very familiar. So I knew where we were going as we moved along through the progression of the documentary, which I really enjoyed. You know, I kind of had a foundation built already of what this story was. And because of that, I had an expectation for it, because I thought the book is very, very good. And the documentary did not disappoint. I think they did very well in taking this same story, but putting it to visual on TV for everybody.
I thought so as well. I was very there were definitely some pieces that that I had definitely not heard of before. I think, and they were just kind of nuances where we all kind of knew the story, but perhaps didn't know some of the examples. Like they mentioned the McDonald's International Bears that got spilled out on a highway, and you see pictures of kids literally running out of their cars
Right.
in moving traffic to get some beanies off the highway. That there were just a few like examples like that, but it brought back such memories. And I mean, what kind of hit home to me was they mentioned a lot over and over at the beginning how Ty never did TV commercials, he never did marketing and things like that.
Advertising, no,
But
almost no.
then he brings in McDonald's, and McDonald's is the juggernaut of advertising. And suddenly they showed on there beanies on TV, beanies on billboards, beanies at, you know, these restaurants where there's one on every street corner in the world. Suddenly now Ty had this megaphone that was instant advertising everywhere. And so it's interesting that the lady who worked for him in publicity, who said, you know, he turned down almost every opportunity to work with somebody, even Steven Spielberg, but he said yes to McDonald's. And
So that is an excellent segue there, David, because that directly connects to what I just talked about with the Great Beanie Baby Bubble book. Although I read the book first and then watched the documentary, the more I think about it, I can almost guarantee you would get more out of their companionship as, you know, literary works by seeing the documentary first and then reading the book, because the documentary does show those scenes and they do discuss the McDonald's, you know, the role they played and having this partnership with Ty and creating the Teeny Beanie line. The documentary, you know, it definitely talks about it for a little while, but it just sort of talks about it in the sense that, oh, and then this happened. Whereas the book explains really, really well. It's not so much that, oh, and then the McDonald's thing happened. It was that the McDonald's thing happened and then boom, everything else came to be. That McDonald's partnership, quite literally, maybe other than the ladies, you know, the cul-de-sac ladies, because as they mentioned in the documentary, they said, you know, we kind of had like a solid year before this went crazy and wild, where it was just us scavenging around our area and around our state. So if you put that into a timeline, because they all kind of cohesively say that they all started around 1996. That timeline absolutely lines up with the McDonald's promotion, because that started in spring of 1997. And that really is the catalyst that set this powder keg on fire. That was really one of the key moments. That's what made Ty Warner a billionaire. You know, he was a millionaire beforehand. His company was prosperous. It was doing well. The partnership with McDonald's turned him into a billionaire, and it did it in very, very short fashion. You know, we're really talking about a span of 3 or 4 years. Is, you know, even though his company is still in business, very much probably still profitable, I would assume. The fact that they're still running, I would assume it's still profitable. But, you know, all of the heavy lifting financially, his earnings and stuff, we really are talking about a span of 3 or 4 years here at the end of the 90s, in no short part due to that McDonald's collaboration. And yeah, you're right, David. He did not do that. You know, basically, like the documentary explains, you know, their phone was ringing off the hook all day. And you'd be lucky to even have someone answer it just to tell you no. So the fact that McDonald's was able to successfully get a partnership, as well as the sports commemorative beanies, that was considered another partnership that they had within the you know, all of the different sporting leagues. MLB was a really prominent one, as well as the NBA, NHL. You know, we have all of those events where beanies were handed out. That was another one that was really well received as far as partnerships with Ty Corp went. But nothing rivaled the success of the McDonald's collaboration.
That was, and that was just incredible. And I mean, for a lot of us, that was what just took it to a whole nother level. Particularly because, I mean, it was hard enough to get your hands on a teeny beanie, but it was fairly doable. But they made you want the regular beanies that much more, and they were nearly impossible. One of those stories that I remember, I'm sure it probably was like the summer of 1997, right after the beanies, was you know, it was around my birthday, and we went to a Hallmark store, and there were, of course, all of these other beanbag lines that wanted to mimic Ty. Everybody wanted to be the new Ty, floppy tossums and bambinos and all these other ones. And I remember I was digging in a stack of black floppy tossums that looked a lot like Velvet Panther, just because I was like, you know, you never know, like it's possible, like something could have got stuck in there somewhere. And sure enough, at the very bottom of the stack, I saw a red tie tag, and a real Velvet, the Panther, was in there. And I was able to get one on my birthday. But like, I remember walking up to the line because it was the only one in the store. I literally like held it under my shirt because I didn't want anyone to see that, you know, here's
for
a kid
fear
who
of
found a
being
Beanie
mugged,
Baby.
right?
But like that was my story of that mimics so many. I mean, in this documentary, you saw this one store that had like one little basket of these beanies, and they like toss it out to the public, and they're all just like madly like, oh, there's probably only, you know, 10 or 12 in this basket. Let me try to get one. And they literally just tossed it out to the crowd, and they're just clamoring over it. So it's really, I mean, truly the only way I would explain it to like a Gen Z or a current kid right now would be, you know, you're on your favorite YouTube channel and it literally crashes because everyone is on there. That's what it felt like, except in person. So
Well, David, we are working our way through our talking points here, and I have just a couple more before we kind of get to our overall opinion and assessment. Um, this is one that I want to spend just a moment on because this was probably, I kind of have this particular bullet point really starred and emphasized here on my list. I had asked myself the question after watching this documentary multiple times. Did the documentary accomplish what it set out to? What would I change if I could? So there are some things I would change about this documentary. With that being said, I do believe it accomplished what it set out to. It told this story very well. And I could be one of those people that initially fell into the group that wanted some sort of help with the landscape of the current market because they really had a platform to do so here. We're on HBO. A lot of people are going to watch this. They had the power to do something that was really helpful to the current community. That did not happen. But I go back to asking myself the question, did it accomplish what it set out to? And the point of this documentary was not to discuss the current landscape. It really was not to discuss the way that Beanie Babies are perceived and collected and bought and sold today. So I have to be fair to them and say, yes, they told the story that they intended to tell, and they did it very, very well. For the most part, what I thought was I would change was about the last 20 minutes. And for anybody that has not watched the documentary yet, I'm going to spoil a little bit here. So, if you want to see it on your own, you can, watch us finish this video with us again later. But the last 20 minutes does kind of revert to our current time here, 2021. And they chose to end out this documentary with a couple of interviews from YouTubers of people sharing their common beanie collections. And we get to see some absolutely stomach turning numbers in regards to the amount of views that these YouTube videos have received. In some instances, we're talking millions of views. And the videos that they chose to include, these people, I don't believe they came right out and said anything really damaging to the current market, but it is absolutely certain that it's YouTube videos like those that we spend a large majority of our time here and now having to fix the damage that they have caused within the current community and current market. People that have done, their level of research that they have committed to in the world of Beanie Babies is probably an hour or less of Google searching. And within that time frame that they believe they have become an expert, all they have done is filled their heads with all of the misinformation that we spend a lot of time combating. Google is a terrible, terrible place to turn to for Beanie Baby information, accurate Beanie Baby information. All of the top hits are going to feed you lies, nonsense. And it's a vicious cycle, These are the types of things that one person says this common beanie is worth $500,000, so the next person says it is also. These are the types of things that are going to tell you, well, this common beanie is ordinarily not worth much unless you have these 19 rare heirs. And of course, they all have these heirs because they were mass produced with these heirs. So, I don't think in the interviews themselves, any of the YouTubers that were included in the documentary said anything that was outright damaging. I don't believe they said anything that was an outright lie, like, here, look at this common beanie, it's worth so much. But the general idea of what their YouTube videos are and what the purpose of them is and discussing those types of things, and they have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of views. This is what we spend our time doing now, is trying to right those wrongs. And we take time out of our lives to try and help this hobby and this community grow, but not just grow for the sake of growth, to grow accurately so that the next generation that starts to enjoy this can enjoy it for the right reasons. And they can be armed with the right proper knowledge that you need in order to truly enjoy or be successful within this hobby. If you're a reseller, if you're a collector, things like that. So the last 20 minutes or so, I probably would have, that probably would not have made my final edit. the YouTubers. Not my favorite note to end on, because while they didn't outright say anything that was maybe harmful, I think a lot of harm can be done to the current community by what goes unsaid. And throughout the entire documentary, one theme is very, very constant, and it's inaccurate. And that theme is, this is the story of how Beanie Babies used to all be valuable, and now none of them are. And that's just not true. It's not. And, you know, for those of us that are in the hobby, you know, I'm surrounded right now by beanies that disprove that point. We would not do this if that were the point. And maybe we would, you know, a little bit. You know, David, you and I know both of us, we still enjoy collecting commons. That is from a passion standpoint, you know, that is the collector in us. It just has to survive, right? We got to feed these passions something to keep this collecting mentality going. And we do that through a source of commons. But with that being said, you know, still lots of beanies out there that are really, really valuable. And the reason I think that misconception has caught on so quickly and so fervently throughout all these videos is because I agree, beanies may never reach the heights, the values they did at the peak of the craze, because the demand was higher then than it likely ever will be again. We were talking about a time when if you asked 5 people what a Beanie Baby was, 5 people told you yes. And while people might still know, there aren't hordes of people running to stores for these anymore. So the price that they were willing to pay back then was unfathomable, right? You know, the values that we saw in the late 90s. So no, do I think that they may ever get back to that value range? Probably not. Extremely unlikely. Does that mean that all beanies are worthless now or close to it? Absolutely not. And that's the assumption that a lot of these videos and informatives and things get wrong. And, you know, a lot of them say it outright. This documentary did not. But that assumption was really present all throughout. You know, all the beanies used to be valuable, and that's no longer the case. You know, there are still plenty of beanies out there that surpass the thousands, multiple thousands mark for an individual piece in mint condition. To me, that's not nothing. It's not nothing. You know, if you're able to acquire a beanie that has a very constant and steady market value from $2,000 up to $6,000-$7,000, which is possible, very rare, very hard to do, possible, yes. If you're able to get one at a good price, you know, it's almost like that. If you could envision somebody going to a thrift store, and as impossible as it may seem, if they were to find a Chef Robuchon sitting in a thrift store, God knows how, but maybe they do, and you pick it up for $1 and you have it authenticated, you invest a little money into it, and you're able to sell it for many, many thousands, that's a success story. And that's the case. That is possible because there are beanies that are still worth money out there. So I just don't like that blanket statement, that blanket assumption that all beanies are worthless now in 2021.
I think
And,
that
you know,
one thing I wanted to mention on that point, if I could,
sure.
is that if the internet has done something, or if the spread of information has done something to the hobby, I think what it's done on that point from secondary market standpoint is we know now for certain what beanies actually are rare.
Yeah.
We actually, like, because it was speculation at the time. A beanie came out and now it's no longer at the store. So is it rare? I'm going to hoard it because I don't know. It's the FOMO, right? Now I know, like, I know that a 3rd generation beanie usually is way, way less produced than a 4th generation. I know for sure because some of these signed beanies, I know it says right on there how many were made. I know it's rare. So I think that it's almost just a matter of we have sorted through the rumors a lot, and we have actually uncovered, here are the ones that really are valuable. Here are the ones that really are limited. And that's going to determine what's the true value now. So it's almost like, that's why I don't see, because those valuable ones still are so valuable, as you said. So I don't see it necessarily as anything, but we have just cleared out the noise. We've cleared out the crap and the rumors, and we've actually made it, this is what it really is now. So
And yeah,
I don't
and
see that
that's the
as a
story.
loss. I see it as just, it's a refining of the hobby.
And that's the story that continues to go untold. That's what I was kind of alluding to when I said maybe I fell into a group of people that wished, that point that you just made, David, as eloquently as you put it, that point could have been conveyed in the documentary within one sentence at the end, or a couple sentences. They could have pushed that truth out there to the world. And it's not that anyone in this documentary, like I said, did anything to harm it, but they just, that gets pushed to the side. That's the story we don't tell. And you're absolutely right. That's exactly why everything was so crazy in the 90s. And the reason that the Beanie Baby bubble burst was really the masses coming to this mass realization that what we now call commons were indeed common. And that's what led to the bubble bursting. So you're right. Now we are armed with the knowledge in this day and age to know, okay, here's everything that we used to think was valuable, but now we know better. Here's everything that we used to think was valuable, and it still is. So now we have that clear cut definition, that dividing line of what is worth something and what isn't. And I guess I just never really understood the take from people who think, you're just lying, none of this is worth anything. I get that. I get that sentiment, because for 95% of people, that is the case, because commons far outweigh the rare stuff, regardless of when it was produced. Like you mentioned, pieces that are numbered, signed to numbered billionaire bears and things like that. They came out quite late in the grand scheme of things of when beanies were produced. We're talking late 2000s, well after the bubble burst, many of them, but they are signed and numbered. They're limited like that. We know that that is something tangible, that is something valuable. And, if us as collectors, the less people that know that there are beanies out there that are valuable and rare, that's a very good thing for collectors. So why do we try and share that with people? Because in order for this hobby to continue to grow and for demand to rise enough for it to make a difference in these values from day to day, people need to understand this truth. We could continue going along with everything that's being said or not being said out there and not telling people there is rare beanies, there is valuable stuff. You should look for it. You should go through your collections. We could keep our lips zipped and keep buying them cheap and adding them to our collections, reselling them for profit. We don't do that, right? Because we've had our time in the sun, and now it's time to see this, this hobby continue to grow and expand. And the key to that is accurate and knowledgeable information. And, that's something David and I, we really pride ourselves on to the best of our abilities. That is what drives us, is getting, really, really helpful and accurate stuff out there for everybody to be able to use to further their collections and their abilities. So overall, David, I recommend this documentary. I recommend it to anybody that has not seen it. I recommend it to families, have your kids join you, whatever the case may be. Cook up some popcorn, get a big bowl, sit down. It's got a really nice short runtime, about 80 minutes, hour 20. If you are into it, if it sucks you in the first, 5 or 10 minutes, as it did me, that time goes by very, very fast. It goes by quickly. It was really, really enjoyable. I absolutely recommend it to anyone that has not seen it. I'll probably watch it again multiple times.
I share that as well. I will be watching it again as well. And I recommend that you do it too. I love that Nick shared at the beginning that he watched it with his son, because that's what this is all about. This was a very important part of our lives, and as you said, this is about keeping the hobby going now, and we can't just keep this information to ourselves and never share it. because it will end along with us, but we have the ability to continue it going on. And so share this info, start watching it with your kids, put it on your Facebook. Hey, like I don't see enough people, even these even a few of the people who were interviewed in this documentary, I don't see them pushing that they love Beanie Babies on Facebook. And I'm like, why not? Push it out there. First of all, be proud that you were in a documentary. That's pretty cool. But say that you love this, say that you enjoy this, and like I guarantee you, every time I talk about it, there are other people I talk to, and they're like, I still have some too, and I still think that they're cool. Well, yeah, like there are other people that think this out there, and just keep having the conversations with them because that's what will keep it going.
Absolutely. There's nothing that we want more than to see these communities grow and grow in the right ways. We want everybody to be on an even playing field here with their understanding of beanies. And in order to do that, you have to take in good information. And I don't think this documentary is bad information. I think it's a great place to start. Even if it's just to try and, even if you have no interest in Beanie Babies whatsoever, if you're on the edge looking for something good to watch, put it on there. See if it stirs up something in you. And if it does, if it makes you feel some type of way, if it makes you feel nostalgic or remembering a time that you remember fondly, come look for us afterwards. Seek us out, and we're here because this is what we do.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time with us tonight. And thank you for all the people who continued bringing in your comments. Please continue the conversation. Long after this is over, we will have this video saved on our website, on our YouTube page. We'll get it on Facebook as well. But continue the conversation going. And just a shameless little final plug there. Mr. Bean's Babies does put up informative videos. If you want some good source of information, we seek to put out good information for free for you so that you know what is true and have that real information that you can have for your participation in the hobby. So keep going to our website, mrbeansbabies.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, YouTube, and we will have a lot more videos like this, hopefully, where we could keep discussions like this going, whether it's about an individual piece or, hey, if VH1 is watching and you want to do a documentary, hit some of the people up. We've got some resources for you. But yeah, we love all of your involvement, and keep the conversation going and keep building the community.
Very well said, David. Very well said. Well, everybody that joined us, we thank you so much. We're so glad that you were able to come and spend a little bit of time with us this evening and discuss this documentary. We hope everybody had a really happy, safe holiday with your loved ones and your families. I know I did. David, I hope you did as well. I had a blast. This was a lot of fun. And, this is what we love to do. We intend to keep doing things like this in the future. The informatives are there for everyone. So until we see everybody next time, I'm Mr. Beans, and I hope you had a fantastic time.